Good evening and welcome to Gravitas. I'm Palki, Sharma, Upadhyay. Let's get started. For the third straight year, the month of January is being ruled by headlines related to the Wuhan virus. The Omicron surge is now a global phenomenon. Cases are rising everywhere. Thankfully, hospitalizations are not rising in the same proportion, and that is the only good news that we can report once again as we talk about the rising number of cases everywhere in the world, including here in India. For the fourth straight day, the Indian tally of new cases has crossed the 100,000 mark. It is inching closer to the 200,000 mark. We're looking at thousands of protesters coming out and protesting in Belgium and other parts of Europe as COVID restrictions are reinforced. We're looking at yet another city facing a harsh lockdown and severe restrictions in China. This time it is the city of Tianjin, where 2 cases of Omicron were found, and the city of 14 million people is being put through mandatory testing. Like we've reported in the past, every country is following its own rule book. Restrictions are being tightened in some places, but the focus now is on saving economies because this surge, this wave of Omicron has disrupted the economic revival. Global agencies are looking at revising their projections. We'll talk about all of that and how this Omicron surge has impacted various industries. Also on the show tonight, it's advantaged Djokovic in the court of law too. An Australian court has upheld his visa. His mother says he was subjected to torture. China's mission to conquer Sri Lanka has taken Foreign Minister Wang Yi to Colombo. We look at the larger plan of Beijing though. Horn of Africa first, then the Maldives and now Sri Lanka. The focus is on the Indian Ocean. We'll discuss what that means for New Delhi. Also, will Indian origin Tory leader Rishi Sunak be the next Prime Minister of Britain? His party believes he's the best suited for the job. We'll get you a report. And why did Hollywood boycott the Golden Globe Awards today? That's also coming up. We start as always with Gravitas Global Headlines.
Russia has ruled out any concession at talks with the United States on soaring tensions over Ukraine, as Moscow faces pressure to pull back troops, seeking a wide-ranging new security arrangement with the West. The group of 15 West African nations will close borders with Mali, sever diplomatic ties and impose tough economic sanctions in response to its unacceptable delay in holding elections following a 2020 military coup. Following widespread violence in Kazakhstan, Tajik President Emomali Rahmon has warned that ISIS is strengthening itself in Afghanistan and over 6,000 terrorists are located near the borders of the Collective Security Treaty Organization or CSTO states. The Taliban held a military parade in Afghanistan's Herat city, featuring military Humvees and trucks that were made in the US that were previously donated to Afghanistan's army. A court in Myanmar has sentenced the ousted leader Aung San Suu Kyi to 4 years in jail on several charges, including possession of unlicensed walkie-talkies. Suu Kyi is on trial for nearly a dozen cases. Iraqi lawmakers cast their votes to elect a new speaker amid a heated inaugural session, just 3 months after legislative elections won by Shiite Muslim firebrand cleric Muqtada al-Sadr. Security forces fire tear gas at Sudanese protesters rallying in the capital, Khartoum, keeping up pressure with the military following a coup 11 weeks ago. The state of Washington saw its worst flooding in a decade, with rivers overflowing. Members of the U.S. National Guard had to evacuate some residents. Heavy rainfall is once again expected in the area in the next 48 hours, along with the prediction for floods and landslides.
India captain Virat Kohli is fit for the Test Series decider against South Africa in Cape Town. Kohli missed the second Test defeat in Johannesburg due to back spasms, but has recovered and will lead the side on Tuesday. However, pacer Mohammad Siraj will miss the clash with a hamstring problem. Australian Cameron Smith produced a new PGA 72-hole record low score of 34 under to clinch the Tournament of Champions and beat world number 1 Jon Rahm by a single shot. In fact, 3 players broke the previous PGA Tour record at the 2022 season opener in Hawaii.
The Wuhan virus remains our top story. Over the weekend, it hit another grim milestone. The number of global cases so far in the pandemic breached the 300 million mark. As of 9 p.m. IST today, the case tally had touched 307 million. Out of these, 13.5 million cases were recorded last week alone. 13.5 million cases in 7 days. That's 64% higher than the last week of 2021. The world is adding an estimated 2 million cases, new cases, every day. 2 million, a trend that is expected to last for at least another week. A total of 34 countries are reporting a major spike in cases. The United States leads the list. It now has a total of 60 million cases overall since the pandemic began. 60 million. 10 million of them were reported in the last 28 days. And almost 500,000 cases were added over the weekend. France is next. Its case count has risen to 12 million, out of which 3 million cases were reported in the last 28 days. More than 300,000 cases were added on Sunday. The UK's total cases so far, 14.5 million. 3 million from the last 28 days, 141,000 over the weekend, 141,000. Next is Italy, 7.4 million cases, 155,000 added on Sunday. Spain is on the 5th spot with 7 million cases. At least 20,000 of them are reinfections. Reports say Spain has added more reinfections in a fortnight than it did during the rest of the pandemic. In India, the situation is no better. The total number of cases stands at 35 million. 1 million cases have been added in the last 28 days. Over 179,000 cases were reported on Sunday in one day. The highest number of new cases India has reported in one day since May 2021, 179,000. And the fourth consecutive day when the daily tally has stood beyond 100,000. Where are these cases being reported in India? Almost everywhere. 22,000 in New Delhi over the weekend, 19,000 in Mumbai. Bengaluru reported 9,000 new cases, Kolkata 8,000 and Chennai 6,000. What about deaths? 146 deaths in the last 24 hours. And this has taken India's cumulative death toll to 483,000 plus. 146. These may not be Omicron deaths only. Health experts say the death rate this time is expected to remain low. The variant is spreading faster, but it's not as lethal. India has rolled out booster shots today. It's administering third doses of the vaccine. They're calling it the precaution dose in India. Who is eligible for this dose? People aged 60 and above with pre-existing medical conditions, along with health professionals and other frontline workers. They all qualify.
Wave of Omicron, which is sweeping across the world, the kind of numbers that are being seen are huge. And though it is said to be the disease is generally running a mild course, but yet you see yesterday the mortality of COVID has increased in Delhi. So whether our healthcare system will get overwhelmed or not, it is yet to be seen. But the system of starting the booster dose for healthcare workers and people above 60 is a significant step.
As Indians queue up to get a third dose, Israel is offering a fourth one. The first country in the world to give the second booster. It's reporting 5,000 new cases daily. The government fears this figure could rise to 15,000 in the days ahead. In fact, Israel's Prime Minister has gone on record to state that 40% of the country's population could get infected in this wave. The decision to roll out a fourth dose was apparently based on this estimate.
Israel will once again be pioneering the global vaccination effort. Omicron is not Delta. It's a different ballgame altogether. We must keep our eye on the ball, act swiftly and decisively if we want to continue engaging and working with an open country as much as possible throughout this pandemic.
In the United States, another disturbing trend continues. Children under the age of 5 are getting hospitalized, the only age group that is not eligible for a vaccine yet. There is no vaccine for children this young. An average of 600 children are being admitted to hospitals daily since last week, a trend that's not being reported elsewhere. The good news is that most of these cases are not severe. The bad news is that the virus is still mutating. Over the weekend, Cyprus discovered a variant with an ominous name, Delta Cron. That's what they're calling it, a strain that combines Delta and Omicron. The scientists who discovered it say that the strain displays, quote-unquote, Omicron-like genetic signatures within the Delta genomes. Is it deadly? Well, there is no clarity yet. The variant has been reported in 25 people so far. The samples have been sent for genome sequencing. At this stage, it's tough to say what this variant has in store for us, whether it will become a matter of concern. But it has become a matter of discussion already. And I know this pandemic is frustrating now. We are in the third year. Every time you feel that you're being punished because of the virus from China, I want you to think about the people who are in China, the worst sufferers perhaps, thanks to their government's impractical zero-COVID policy. The latest city to be hit is Tianjin. 2 Omicron cases were detected in this city too. Guess how many people are being tested for this? 14 million. 14 million people being put through mandatory testing. There is no method to this madness. And while hospitalizations thankfully remain low, the variant has the potential to send economies back in the ICU. 2022 was expected to be the year of recovery. The beginning has been shaky. The surge has led to disruptions. Financial bodies are revising their estimates. Governments are lowering their projections. What impact will the Omicron variant have on the global economy? Is it going to be mild, severe, or fatal? Here's a report.
The sharp surge in Wuhan virus cases has renewed economic uncertainty the world over. The International Monetary Fund had estimated that the global economy would grow 4.9% in 2022. It is now expected to revise its estimates and release an updated forecast on January 25th. For now, the IMF has warned of rough times ahead. It says global economic growth could slow down, thanks to what it calls the stubbornly resurgent pandemic. Irrespective of what the projections say, the suffering is evident. Omicron is sending every major sector back into familiar territory. It has already hit travel, spelling turbulence for the aviation industry. On Christmas Eve alone, more than 4,500 flights were cancelled globally. According to FlightAware, 18,500 flights have been cancelled since then. The cancellations are mostly due to staffing shortages caused by a spike in cases. Several airline companies are revising their winter schedule. Lufthansa has confirmed plans to cut 33,000 flights. In India, Indigo is expected to cut 20% of its flights. With several airlines on a wing and a prayer, the hospitality sector is expected to take a hit. Omicron has emptied hotels the world over. In India, 30% cancellations were reported in the last 1 week. Globally, 2 rapid cancellations of hotel bookings are underway. This has put the hospitality industry on alert mode. Surveys point towards a shaky recovery in the hospitality sector in 2022. As travel and tourism suffer, an economic rebound looks doubtful. Mark Zandi, the chief economist at Moody's, says he expects a 2.2% economic growth in the US in the first quarter. That's less than half of a previous estimate of 5.2%. In Europe, Omicron is fueling inflation. Last month, inflation in the Eurozone unexpectedly hit 5%, the highest since 1997 for this 19-country bloc. Consumer prices are expected to rise further. Disruptions in supply chains will worsen, and depending on how long the Omicron surge lasts, these problems will only prolong or worsen. Back in India, the Department for Promotion of Industry and Internal Trade has said that Omicron is unlikely to have much of an economic impact. The DPIIT secretary says the impact will not be more than 5 to 10 basis points, for which the country is apparently prepared. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
Rules are rules.
They are keeping him as a prisoner.
Novak Djokovic rarely spends 5 hours on court, and when he does, he usually ends up winning. Today was no different, except it wasn't the court that Djokovic is used to, and there was no standing ovation to celebrate it. Earlier today, an Australian judge ruled in Djokovic's favour. The decision to deport him was overturned. So where is Novak Djokovic right now? He went to the tennis court apparently. Plus, he's got his phone back. He tweeted a message a short while back. This is what he said, and I'm quoting. "I'm pleased and grateful that the judge overturned my visa cancellation. Despite all that has happened, I want to stay and try to compete at the Australian Open." But will the organisers let him? Well, not so fast. Australia's immigration minister can still cancel Djokovic's visa. If that happens, he will be on the next flight to Serbia. But there is a time frame. The Australian Open has set a deadline for Djokovic. January 11th. By then, there must be clarity on his status. Will he play or not? This entire controversy is a series of mistakes. First by Djokovic, who refuses to take a life-saving vaccine, and then by the Australian government. Exemptions, no exemptions. Their messaging has been all over the place. In the end, the court had to step in and decide. But why did the court side with Djokovic? Because his lawyers claim they had proof of vaccine exemption. What was this highly secretive exemption for? For contracting COVID-19. Novak Djokovic now says that he tested positive on the 16th of December 2021, last month. He tested positive, he says. Now we know that recovered patients cannot immediately take the jab. So this is Djokovic's excuse. We have 3 problems with this defense. Number 1, why hide your infection? This is not the first time that he's been infected. He was infected in June 2020 as well. And back then he issued a statement confirming it. So why not this time? Problem number 2, if Djokovic tested positive on December 16th, why was he not isolating? Now this is a tweet from December 17th, one day after he was allegedly infected. He was at a public event in Serbia. No mask, no social distancing, as you can see. In fact, he's shaking hands with people. Here's another picture from the same day. This time, Djokovic is with young tennis players. Again, no mask, no social distancing. I don't know which pandemic playbook Djokovic is using, but in most countries, this is a criminal offense. To hide your infection, to go out and meet people knowing that you're infected, it is a crime. But there is one key difference here. Rules, it seems, apply to normal citizens. This is world number 1, Novak Djokovic. Problem number 3, why did he wait until December to try and get vaccinated? Serbia's vaccine drive started in December 2020. Djokovic was allegedly infected 1 year later, so he had more than 300 days to get vaccinated, but he did not. This is not a medical exemption. This is vaccine hesitancy. What do the people of Australia make of this verdict? This big circus around one tennis player, what do they make of it?
I think it's pretty ridiculous that no one will protest for anyone else except for a tennis player who is here in the country. And it's just, I think it's ridiculous. No one cares this much about anything else except for a tennis player. It's so dumb.
The courts in Australia don't seem bothered about these problems. They have sided with the player. Not surprising, considering how this entire episode has played out. The Australian government has plenty to answer for. Why was Djokovic given a visa in the first place? If he said he had a medical exemption, why did no one cross-check it? Why wait until he lands in Australia to check it? Why create all of this chaos? This, you see, is a story of mismanagement and entitlement. Novak Djokovic believes that he is above the rules. He wasn't the only one who landed in Australia without a vaccine, but the others were booted out. Djokovic used his power to lawyer up, and suddenly fans are raising hell on social media. The Serbian government is getting involved. All of this outrage for what? Because their golden boy was not put up in a five-star hotel. In case there is confusion, Djokovic is not a refugee. He went to Australia by choice. He invited this controversy and chaos, so complaining now is pointless.
We have come to, in some way, celebrate the victory of our son, our Novak, a young man who has learned in his family not to tolerate lies, not to tolerate fraud. He's always fought for justice. He is not guilty of anything. He did nothing that is against their laws, and yet he suffered such torture.
There is no justification for what Novak Djokovic did. He could have scripted history in Melbourne. 3 men's players are currently on 20 Grand Slam titles: Djokovic, Rafael Nadal and Roger Federer. Federer is not playing this year, and hard courts are not Nadal's forte. So this was Djokovic's chance to script history, to skip ahead of Nadal and Federer to become the first men's player to win 21 titles. Instead, he does this. Refuses to take what billions of people already have, a vaccine that has probably saved millions of lives. This is not what true champions do. I know the fans will keep rooting for Djokovic. I know they expect him to channel this frustration. They expect him to win the Australian Open, and who knows, maybe he will. But this Grand Slam will forever be tainted in the history books. It won't be remembered for the tennis. It will be remembered for the chaos. A player who put his false beliefs over the lives of fellow competitors and fans. A government that put its people under strict lockdown but failed to keep a vaccine skeptic from playing. Let me take you back to November 2021. Australia had just opened its borders after more than a year of restrictions. Families had not seen each other for more than 500 days. You may remember these emotional scenes from the Sydney airport.
Oh my God, paparazzi, paparazzi!
And we wonder why Australians are unhappy. They suffered under one of the strictest lockdowns in the world. They were separated from their families. 500 days, they were stranded abroad. And now this entitled tennis player waltzes in. No vaccine, no concern. But the courts let him stay. This isn't a Grand Slam anymore. It's a joke. With a D, if I may add. And I'll tell you what else is a joke. Chinese diplomacy. For most countries, diplomacy is about reaching out. It's about talking as equals. Not for China. For them, diplomacy is a cover for aggression. An excuse to lay debt traps and squeeze economies. Now, with that mission in mind, their man Friday landed in Sri Lanka. Foreign Minister Wong Yi. Last week, he was touring East Africa. He was trying to convince African nations to borrow more from China, basically dig their own grave. In Sri Lanka, his challenge was different. You see, African nations are yet to understand the debt trap. But Sri Lanka knows exactly what it means. They have already paid the price once. So Wong Yi's mission was simple. Win over the Lankans, push them away from India's sphere of influence. He met both President Gotabaya Rajapaksa and his brother, Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa, displaying uncharacteristic bonhomie. Both conversations had the same elephant in the room, the Sri Lankan economy. Colombo is running out of foreign reserves. At this rate, it could soon default on foreign loans. So the president had 2 major demands from China. One, to restructure the debt Beijing accounts for nearly 10% of Sri Lanka's foreign debt. That's around $35 billion. President Gotabaya Rajapaksa wants to restructure these loans. Basically, he wants some breathing space until he can pay back. Demand number 2, a concessional trade scheme. Sri Lanka doesn't have money to buy goods from China, but those goods are vital to the livelihood of Sri Lankans. We're talking about appliances, plastic, clothes. So President Gotabaya Rajapaksa wants to keep this import tap open, but he wants to do it cheaply. How did China respond to these demands? Well, they haven't made any promises, but Wang Yi's intentions were clear. He's not in Colombo to rescue Sri Lanka, you see. He's in Colombo to conquer it. Even during the bilaterals, power equations were on his mind. Listen to this.
We opened the door of friendship and exchange with each other. This demonstrates our two countries' strong character in defying power politics. That is the strong character of our nations. We have also defied the constraints of the Cold War or the line of ideologies.
Sri Lanka knows these games. They fell for it once and lost the Hambantota port, so they are desperately trying to avoid a repeat. First, they banned Chinese fertilizers. Then they dropped the Chinese power plant in the north. These are good steps, but they won't change the past. You see, China has already invested millions of dollars in Sri Lankan projects. The best example is this one, Port City, Colombo. It is being built on land reclaimed from the Indian Ocean. China is funding it. They're slated to invest $1 billion in the port city. And with that kind of money comes clout. On Sunday, that clout was on display. Wang Yi was invited to inaugurate the promenade of the Colombo port city. 65 sailboats set off from the new facility. 65 boats to mark 65 years of diplomatic relations between China and Sri Lanka. Well, all we could see was Lankan hopes sailing away. Metaphors aside, only one thing can spoil this story for China, the Sri Lankan people. They have seen the Rajapaksa sign away national assets. They're feeling the pinch of this economic crisis. No food grains, no power, long queues at the market. All of this boils down to China's predatory lending. Sri Lanka's leaders are seeing this frustration. They have started looking elsewhere for help. Like India, for instance. Colombo has signed a major oil farm deal with India. We told you about it. They're also negotiating credit lines worth $1.5 billion. China also sees this, and they're not happy with what they see, which is why Beijing is trying a bottom-to-top approach now. Instead of buying out leaders, or buying out leaders only, they're reaching out to the people. You may remember these pictures from last month. China's ambassador visiting a temple near Jaffna, shirts off, dhoti in, a communist atheist turned worshipper. Two problems with this outreach. One, it is not genuine. China is trying to buy vulnerable communities with their money. And two, it's a tad late for outreach, don't you think? You cannot confiscate a country's port, saddle it with loans, and then expect the people to embrace you. The fact is, China is partly responsible for Sri Lanka's financial ruin. The leaders and the people have started realizing this. So what does China do? Dispatch Wang Yi to win hearts and strike deals. Except diplomacy is not their strong suit. Beijing intends to dominate the Indian Ocean, and for that, Sri Lanka is an important outpost. Before landing in Colombo, Wang Yi had visited the Maldives, and he had the same proposal there. A special forum for developing Indian Ocean island states. Does that sound familiar to you? It should, because India has a similar forum. It's called SAGAR, Security and Growth for All in the Region, SAGAR. As always, there is a bigger Chinese design here. The first leg of Wang Yi's visit was to Eastern Africa. And what's special about Eastern Africa? It borders the Indian Ocean. The second leg covered the Maldives and Sri Lanka, two major island nations in the Indian Ocean. You see the pattern. India must take note of this visit. Now is the time to counter Chinese designs through checkbook and through diplomacy. And who do you think is the busiest leader in the world? Well, this week we have a clear winner. It's Russian President Vladimir Putin. He is handling two major crises, neither of which is happening inside Russia. First, the mandatory standoff in Ukraine, and second, the unrest in Kazakhstan. Like Putin, we'll begin with Ukraine. The talks between the US and Russia have begun in Geneva. The US is represented by Deputy Secretary of State Wendy Sherman. Russia is represented by Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Rybkov. Remember, Putin wants some big concessions here. He wants to veto Ukraine's NATO membership. He does not want Ukraine to join the NATO. And he wants the alliance, NATO, to vacate Eastern Europe, Russia's neighborhood, basically. The US won't accept either. So two big no's. That sets the tone for the talks. And here's the most important thing that you must know about this meeting. Nobody is expecting a breakthrough. Not America, not Russia, not NATO. Listen to this.
I don't think we can expect that these meetings will solve all the issues. What we are hoping for is that we can agree on a way forward, that we can agree on a series of meetings, that we can agree on the process. So it's not realistic to expect that when we have finished this week.
Sums up the mood in Geneva. Multiple talks are scheduled throughout this week. The European Union is also expected to join them. But what are these world powers trying to achieve? The bare minimum. Preventing a war tops the agenda in Geneva. Nobody is even thinking about a lasting solution. And how can they? Ukraine is not even at the table, believe it or not. The West and Russia are negotiating Ukraine's future, but it's not on the table. They're meeting to decide if Ukraine will join the NATO. They're meeting to discuss if Russia will invade Ukraine. But not even a single Ukrainian is sitting at the table. In Kiev, there were protests against this setup. Every protester had the same question. If you're talking Ukraine, why haven't you invited Ukraine?
I think it should not be this way without Ukraine. Ukraine must be present during those meetings because it is a more interested party than other countries, more interested party than Russia and United States. Ukraine must be sitting in the first row.
And that's how these world powers work, in fact. They make pawns out of smaller nations, which brings us to Putin's crisis number 2, the unrest in Kazakhstan. Most of the protesters have returned home there, not by choice, but by force. Nearly 164 people were killed in the crackdown. Around 8,000 have been detained. With Russia's help, Kazakhstan's president has sent a powerful message. Dissent will not be tolerated. After the protests were put down, regional leaders met to take stock. A special meeting of the CSTO was convened. That's the Collective Security Treaty Organization, CSTO. You can call it a Soviet NATO. All eyes were on Putin. How would he react to the protests? Would he lay out a roadmap for former Soviet states? Well, Putin's reaction was along expected lines. He blamed foreign agents for masterminding the protests.
Of course, we understand that the events in Kazakhstan are not the first and not the last attempt at interfering in the internal affairs of our states from outside. I agree with the Belarusian president. The measures that the CSTO took made it clear that we would not let anyone destabilize the situation at our home and implement the so-called color revolution scenarios.
The Russian president also sees the pattern. First Ukraine, then Belarus, now Kazakhstan. People are rising up in revolt. They're demanding real democracy. Russia has the manpower and the resources to put down such dissent. Can these other states do that? States like Belarus and Kazakhstan. How long before they are overwhelmed? Leaders of the ex-Soviet states are asking the same question. The Kazakh president, for instance, is calling this a coup attempt. The president says that he has arrested a former head of the Kazakh spy agency. Rumor is there was an internal power struggle in Kazakhstan. But that doesn't discount the urgency of the protests. For now, this unrest has given Putin a reason to directly interfere in Kazakhstan. His troops are deployed inside the Kazakh borders. America says these Russian soldiers are there to stay. Putin says they will leave once the mission is over. But the real question is, has Russia stretched itself too thin? Remember, this is not the Russia of the 20th century. It's got the military for war, but not the economy. So has Putin overplayed his hand by focusing on both Ukraine and Kazakhstan at the same time? And how long can he keep acting as the local sheriff? We'll keep tracking this story for you. For the moment, we're moving to the United Kingdom, where Rishi Sunak has emerged as a popular choice to be the country's next Prime Minister. For those who don't know him, Rishi Sunak is the Indian origin finance minister of the UK. He has been called a prime minister in waiting by his fans for quite some time, but now members of his party, the Conservative Party, have joined the chorus. A recent survey says that nearly half of all Tories are in favour of Sunak becoming the prime minister. 46% even say that he would do a better job than the current prime minister, Boris Johnson. Here's a report.
Good morning.
Meet Rishi Sunak, the Indian origin finance minister of the UK, or the Chancellor of the Exchequer, as the Brits call him. For 2 years, the 41-year-old has been at the helm of Britain's Treasury, a job he is said to have aced from the very start. In March 2020, when Sunak was only 2 months into his new job, he delivered a budget that was termed historic. He loosened the purse strings, increased public spending, and froze tax on all kinds of alcohol. His acumen and statesman-like approach made many call him a prime minister in waiting. First, his supporters said this. Now, his colleagues have joined the chorus. Nearly half of the members in UK's Conservative Party think that Rishi Sunak would be a better Prime Minister than Boris Johnson. A recent survey of over 1,000 Tories has found that Sunak may be a better fit in 10 Downing Street. The Tories were asked to vote on who they want to see as Prime Minister. Sunak emerged to be the clear winner with 33% of the vote, followed by Foreign Secretary Liz Truss at 25%. Ex-Foreign Secretary Jeremy Hunt at 8%, Levelling Up Secretary Michael Gove at 6%, and Priti Patel and Dominic Raab at 4% each. Not only is Sunak the most popular choice, he is also expected to be a better Tory leader than Boris Johnson. At least 46% of the Tories say Sunak would do a better job than the current party leader if he is elected. Not. Why? Because his current job as finance minister was already tiring, he said. This was in 2020. Much water has flowed down the Thames since then. Boris Johnson has faced 2 mutinies, allegations of partying during lockdowns, using Tory money to refurbish his apartment, and protecting lawmakers accused of sleaze. To put it simply, Boris Johnson is a leader in disgrace. His approval ratings are sinking. His political star is dimming. Is Britain's number 2 ready to rise to the occasion and claim the opportunity? Bureau Report, WION World is One.
Prime Minister for advance sight of his statement.
Sunday was the night of the Golden Globe Awards. It was once Tinseltown's biggest party. The ceremony used to draw almost 18 million television viewers. But on Sunday night, the 79th edition was reduced to a live blog. The awards were held without a television broadcast, without nominees, without a red carpet, and even without a host. Not so much because of the Wuhan virus, but because of a Hollywood boycott. Here's all you want to know about Hollywood's latest controversy.
A star-studded red carpet. Huge crowds jostling each other, oohing and awing at ball gowns and tuxes. This was once the biggest party in Hollywood, the Golden Globes ceremony. For years, the Golden Globes have been the most entertaining awards ceremony.
Before I started filming.
But if you thought last year's virtual ceremony was bad, wait till you see what happened this year. No red carpet, no celebrities in attendance, and no live stream. The ceremony was not even televised. Winners were updated via a live blog. The venue was the same.
Los Angeles' Beverly Hilton Hotel, but this time behind closed doors. A controversy-plagued edition of the Golden Globes that continues to be under the scanner. In focus is an embattled Hollywood Foreign Press Association, or HFPA. It started in November 2020 with an antitrust lawsuit. It accused the association of cultural corruption, claiming that the tax-exempt organization operated as a kind of cartel. They were accused of barring qualified applicants, monopolizing the all-important press access, and improperly subsidizing its members' income. Soon, an investigation accused the HFPA of self-dealing. The group is said to have accepted inappropriate gifts and benefit from companies backing some nominees. Another important allegation was the lack of diversity. The organization had no black members. There was not a single black journalist in the 87-person group, a fact that Hollywood has known for years. So while the big winners this year were Jane Campion's The Power of the Dog,
It's just a man, Peter. Only another man.
and Steven Spielberg's West Side Story, none of the winners were present at the event.
It's a critical moment, Lucy.
If I'm gonna die...
Nor did they immediately comment on their awards, which brings us to this famous speech by Meryl Streep.
Who are we? And you know, what is Hollywood anyway? It's just a bunch of people from other places. I was born and raised and educated in the public schools of New Jersey. Viola was born in a sharecropper's cabin in South Carolina. Ryan Gosling, like all the nicest people, is Canadian. And Dev Patel was born in Kenya, raised in London, and is here for playing an Indian raised in Tasmania. So Hollywood is crawling with outsiders and foreigners. And if we kick them all out, you'll have nothing to watch but football and mixed martial arts, which are not the arts.
Without diversity, Hollywood is basically an empty stage. The latest Golden Globes ceremony indicates just that. As for the Hollywood Foreign Press Association, they should simply sit the year out. That and some amount of soul-searching would have been the smarter thing to do. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
So here's what our world looks like. A mutating virus, an aggressive China, and warmongering superpowers. It's just another Monday on planet Earth, you could say. Humans are the creators of headaches, also the sufferers. We tend to dismiss them as irritants, headaches, but a headache can be a big deal, especially if it's a migraine. How big? Migraine is the 7th highest cause of disability in the world. It is serious stuff. And that's why, when there's talk of a so-called blockbuster treatment for migraine, it is prime time news. I'll start with the numbers, as always. In the last 1 year, up to 75% of adults in the world are said to have had a headache. 30% of them were migraines. One estimate says 190,000 migraine attacks are experienced every day in England. 6 million people in the UK suffer from migraine. An estimated 41 million adults in Europe have reported it. Migraine alone costs European economies as much as $57 billion a year. 57 billion. That's 1/3 of the EU budget for 2019. In the United States, more than 15% of all adults complain about severe headaches or migraines. This leads to loss of productivity, a loss of more than $13 billion a year in the US alone. Why is migraine so serious? Because it doesn't come alone. It is accompanied by other disabling symptoms like nausea, vomiting, and sensitivity to light and sound. Around 40% of people living with migraine are affected by these symptoms for at least 4 days every month. A person with migraine is absent from work on average for nearly 6 days every year due to their condition. Worldwide, the average loss of productivity is 35%. Long story short, a migraine is taxing in more ways than one. It is recurring and in most cases lifelong. Like I said, they're saying that there's a breakthrough treatment that's out now, a monthly jab that is said to have transformed migraine therapy. And I know what you're thinking, one more shot. Well, don't take it if you don't like the idea, but doctors in England and Wales have given it a thumbs up. This jab can be taken in the arm, tummy or leg. So far, it was restricted to patients of chronic migraine, those who suffered attacks at least 15 days a month. Now the drug has been approved for wider migraine treatment and prevention. The UK's Public Health Department has recommended it for patients who suffer at least 4 migraine attacks a month. Experts have welcomed the move, some even calling the decision life-changing. You see, for years, there was nothing that could prevent migraines or reduce their frequency. Treating migraines has been a challenge because we still don't understand what causes them. Genes, hormones, or certain external triggers, there's no clarity. But now science has offered solutions, and we sincerely hope it helps. Wrapping on that note, leaving you with Gravitas images. Thanks for watching.
The rally monkey remains at center ice as he acknowledges the crowd with apologies to the great Paul Griss, one of our television here tonight. The rally monkey dropping the ceremonial first puck. And there it is.
I'm not going to say that he did it.
الثاني ومنى فساد